do turn it over to Wayman real quick to give some instructions for public comment, and then I'm going to open up the meeting. Wayman?
Yes, this meeting was posted electronically as well as through the mail for the county commissioners. And this meeting of the executive committee pursuant to Governor Whitmer's Executive Order 2020-48, the executive committee of the Kent County Board of Commissioners, in order to protect the public, will conduct this meeting via electronic communications. Any member of the public wishing to listen to the proceedings or provide public comment may do so by using the following internet connections or phone numbers and passcode. This information was sent out through a meeting notice, as well as it is identified on the screen. If you're watching via video, please mute your phones until being asked. Well, the phones will be muted. If you have a public comment, and Madam Chair will call upon you, you have 3 minutes to give public comment, and then she will move on, and she will give instructions on that. So, Madam Chair, it's back up.
I was hoping you'd give instructions on the public comment. Are they emailing them, or are they raising their hand, or how are we going to work that?
They're emailing them through chat or raising their hands. And then, Madam Chair, one more thing: any disruptions during the meeting by using offensive language or actions, people will be muted from that conversation. Our conversation.
And where are they emailing them to?
Public comments at Kent County MI.
Public comment at MI.
KentCountyMI.gov.
Public comment at MI, KentCountyMI.gov. KentCountyMI.gov.
Okay. All right. So with that, we're going to get started. I want to remind members of the public, staff, and board members that are not on the executive committee, I will only be calling on executive committee members once we get started after public comment to keep this moving. This is a report out. This is not a work session. It's not a board meeting. So that's kind of how we're gonna utilize this format today. Moving forward, as you know, as we get continued financial projections and into the budget cycle, we most likely will be having our work sessions and various other means of communication. So with that, I will open up the executive committee meeting for April 23rd. Do we have any public comment today? Anything coming through, Wayman?
No, nothing, Madam Chair.
Any raised hands?
Nobody's raised.
Nothing in the email.
Nothing, Madam Chair.
Okay, we'll give it a couple more seconds. And I don't know how fast people can type, so. All right, anything coming through?
Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing at all.
All right, and I also want to ask executive committee members, when we make a motion or a second, please give me your last name so I can hear who's making those motions. So with that, I will move to item 2, approval of the minutes from March 17th. Do I have a motion and a second?
Stack move to approve.
Breivy, support.
Moved by Commissioner Steck, support by Commissioner Breivy. Questions or comments on the minutes? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved. Okay, we're going to go on to new business, and I believe I'm going to call on Jeff Doe to talk about the financial projections, bond rating, and 82 Ionia. Jeff?
Muted.
Jeff, you got to unmute.
There
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm sorry about that. So MB, could you pull up the general fund forecast? So I'm mainly going to focus on this document, and it's something we prepared for the rating agency calls that were held last week with Moody's and Standard & Poor's. And Chair Bolter, do you want to make a quick announcement on the results of those before I begin here?
Sure, I'm happy to do it. We did have our call. It was a very unique situation. We had our calls on Thursday and Friday of last week. Despite what we're experiencing now, I think because we've had such solid fiscal policies, and it truly comes down to our policies, not state law, not anything else. It's our policies. We did receive the AAA bond rating again from both Standard & Poor's and Moody's. So that is very impressive. I think considering the circumstances, considering most government entities are not considered especially stable in these circumstances. So I want to also really mention how great of a job Jeff did. I don't know if that's why he prompted me to say this, but he did do a great job, and we were very well represented by our entire team, our treasurer, our consultants, Wayman. But I just kick it off with some good news. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Jeff.
All right, thanks, Chair Bolter. No, it was a really good 2 meetings. They went very, very well. And again, we received that second rating late yesterday. So I'm very, very pleased to see that. Especially, we received a stable outlook from both agencies as well. And pretty much the entire governmental sector overall has been put on a watch by Standard & Poor's. So to get that stable rating was exceptional. So I'll try to be brief here. They asked a lot during the rating calls about our financial projections and what COVID-19, is doing to our finances. And I'm sure if you read article after article, there's already talk about substantial government layoffs and things like that. So what we did is we took a look at our 2020 adopted and did a 2020 estimate column. And we're lucky in Kent County that property taxes are our primary revenue source. And you can see this document in the 2020 adopted column, and then you'll see some yellow highlights in the 2020 estimate. So what we did to be conservative is we reduced the property tax number to the Great Recession collection rate. You can see that dropped it by about $3.3 million is what we're anticipating for 2020. We did learn the state local community stabilization share should be back to normal levels because that's a differently funded item. And you can see in 19, we actually got 3.1. So we did bump that back up a little bit. So that was some good news. MB, if you roll down a little bit more, you can see the $24.9 million charges for services. We cut many of those revenue streams by about 25%. So you can see we're expecting about a $4.1 million reduction this year in those. Additionally, fines and forfeitures later down the page. We expect a decline there. We did anticipate upping or increasing the transfers in from the corrections and detention millage to 16.5. So you can see overall we're anticipating to collect about $184.6 million or 5.2 million less than our 2020 budget. So that's what we're thinking this year as far as revenues go in 2020. We can move on to expenses next unless someone has any questions on that.
Any questions for Jeff on the revenue side? I guess, Jeff, I have one question in terms of, I know these are all pooled together, but when you came up with these estimates, I mean, I guess kind of getting in a little bit more micro, is it hotel motel tax? Are these just property taxes we're basing this on? How did you come up with those numbers, I guess? What was the methodology?
So the hotel motel tax is maintained in a separate fund, the lodging and excise tax fund. That was done with a completely different analysis. We plugged in the estimates from the Experience Grand Rapids. They sent us a detailed report of what they've done with their expenses to try to control expenses and the revenue projections. And we have a separate fund we account for that. So we put in their new estimates, and where that would show up would be on the expense side, if we felt that we were going to have to subsidize those bond payments or something like that, which we don't feel is going to have to happen at this point, at least for 20 and 21. So that fund, actually, if their revenue projections hold, we don't see any additional GOF support for that until those bonds are paid off with our current projections. Obviously, it's early on, and we will continue to monitor, but that's not directly impacted on the general fund statement itself today. Same thing for airport. We've been in constant contact with them. They've done some analysis on their finances. They're making some cuts. They've also received $16.2 million of direct support from the federal government, and they feel confident as well that they can meet 20 and 21 bond payment and operation expenses without any additional subsidies from the county. So those are our two main other funds that we looked at closely. Of course, we continue to monitor all of our funds, but as of things stand today, we're in pretty good shape on that end. Did that answer your question?
Yep. Any other questions? Do we have any hands up, Wayman?
Yeah, this is Steck. I had a question for Jeff. I didn't know if he had more information on the airport reimbursement at 16 million. When I looked at it, it still seemed proportionately low. Do you have more information on why the number was what it was?
I don't have any additional information on how they determined that. I know there was an allocation, countrywide for airports, and I believe it was based upon number of flights, but don't quote me on that. But I don't know how that allocation came to be. Sorry.
Thank you.
Commissioner Talon has a hand up.
Commissioner Talon?
Thank you, Chair. Could we scroll back up to the top of the table? I wanted to look at the what was it? The property taxes, and Jeff wanted to ask about your decision to choose that number. It says to the recessionary collection rate, and generally we understand that property taxes go down. There's a delay before they go down, so I'm a little surprised to see that number already this year. Can you talk a little more about that?
So this isn't actually reducing the overall taxable value or anything of the tax base itself. This is just expecting taxpayers to pay a little more slowly. So to be I guess cautious or conservative in our estimates, we look back at historically how people paid during the Great Recession, and typically we would collect about 96.5% of property taxes by March. During the Great Recession, we only collected 92.5%, and what that does is increase the amount of DTANs notes we issue. And I believe, again, I wasn't here then, but I think during the Great Recession it was around 36 or so million. This year we're anticipating issuing 16.2 million. So it's not a reduction in property taxes themselves, just the speed at which we expect to collect them.
And just to clarify, we recognize the revenue after it's paid. It's not looked at as a receivable.
Correct, as it's paid, yes.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions before Jeff proceeds? Any other hands up?
No, Madam Chair.
All right, MB, if you can scroll down to expenditures. The other thing we did is take a look at our estimates for expenses, and this is based on historical knowledge as well as some of the issues with COVID. You can see we're anticipating overtime to be up. However, I believe a lot of that may be reimbursed through the CARES Act and or the FEMA grants that we're going to receive. And I just found out this morning we did get some additional guidance on the CARES Act, and it seems like it's a pretty broad, we're able to use that pretty broadly. So we'll dig into that after this meeting today. If we roll down to supplies, my deputy Marvin went through and he really estimated typically, or he went back historically and adjusted expenses. And you can see some went up, some went down, but this is what we anticipate based on historical use and also some of the costs related to COVID. So if you go down, you can see the expenses overall, we expect to be up by about $2 million, contract services anyway. Keep moving down there.
Yep.
You can see capital changed just a little bit. If you go down to transfers out, you can see we expect that to go up to, or down, I'm sorry, $3.2 million from 47. So overall, the total expenditures we're expecting to be down from budget about $3.8 million. And then today we're still anticipating about a $600,000 surplus for the year for the general fund. So I think we've done a really good analysis using historical numbers as well as our best guess estimates on what COVID's going to do to us this year. And again, I have to go through the guidance, but it appears, a lot of the additional expenses will be 100% covered by the CARES Act. Our allocation we applied for last week. We expect to get that soon, although from what I understand, it's not in the bank yet. It isn't for anyone across the state. I talked to our treasurer or someone from the state the other day, and no one's received an allocation yet. But I quickly glanced through the guidance today, and it gives us pretty broad powers to use those funds to reimburse us for 2020 for any additional costs. So I think this is very conservative. This is what we portrayed to the rating agencies, and they felt comfortable with their numbers as well. So.
Questions or comments on any of this? Any hands up?
Yeah, this is, sorry, I didn't put my hand up, Stack.
Yep. Go ahead.
Jeff, what's your intention with respect to how frequently you'll review this or assess this against reality going forward through the end of the year?
So we do this, obviously we provide the commission quarterly update, but my staff, we have team lead supervisors that review their funds almost, I don't want to say daily, but almost daily. They're continually reviewing the budgets. So we monitor this all the time. Additionally, Marvin's been working on getting the budget prepared. It's that time of year again already. So he expects to have the preliminary spreadsheets distributed around May 1st. And then we'll get a better handle from the departments because we're not experts on all the revenue streams and things. So we'll get the information back from the departments hopefully soon here. Again, following the normal time frame, those should go out early May. So again, we continually monitor this. We always monitor the lodging and excise tax, and of course our airport friends, and all of our revenues and expenses we continually monitor.
Yeah, there's probably a fair amount of angst about all this, so maybe a little more regular reporting to the board on how this is going. Just a suggestion.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments for Jeff related to this? Any hands up?
No hands up, Madam Chair.
Jeff, I had another quick question. I did get several calls this week about, property tax delays. I mean, I know you addressed this a little bit, and I know we collect, and our collections are different times through the year. What would the effect be if we, or is there a precedence, and maybe Wayman can answer this, to delay property taxes for folks who have been closed or are highly affected? Have we done that in the past? Could we look at that? Is that an option?
During my 16 years, it has never happened. During my 16 years, Jim, you've probably been on longer than most. I don't know if you've ever experienced that. I see you shaking your head. No.
I've been in government 22 years and I've never witnessed it. I think it would take an act from the governor or the legislator to change the law of collection, the dates. This is typically the low point in cash flow for the county just because we're gearing up towards July 1 when the tax bills typically go out. Do we have reserves to cover it if they delayed it for 2 months? Probably. If we didn't, if we thought we got too low, we could always issue additional detans to cover that lapse in time. So,
do we have a mechanism for people to do like a payment system where, for instance, I'm a restaurant, I'm probably not going to open in July. I haven't been open since March. Is there a way to, do we have a payment mechanism? Do you know?
Well, what the treasurer will do, if people come to him they have to interact with the treasurer's office. So if they have issues with being able to pay their taxes on time, they need to get with him and work out whatever arrangements he sees that could be made to accomplish the goal of not being delinquent. However, he's operating with the law in which states your taxes are due on this date. If they get behind, then that's a matter of negotiating out. If they can't pay them and they're delinquent, that's when the negotiations become his ability to say, okay, here's how we can work this out. But that's really a question for the treasurer, Madam Chair.
Okay.
This is Steck. In my experience of working with them on behalf of clients, he is pretty responsive to those situations in working those out. The other thing I noticed, I believe that certainly by the time you get to the point of a possible tax foreclosure, those are subjected to the emergency orders, as I recall. Maybe Linda's there to confirm that.
Yeah, that's correct.
Commissioner Steck is accurate that there were executive orders that impact foreclosures. Keeping in mind that a tax foreclosure is several years down the road if somebody is currently current on their taxes. Additionally, when we talk about payment plans and things like that, it would take some coordination with all of the taxing jurisdictions that are on any particular tax bill. That's not to say that something won't come out of Lansing, but I haven't seen anything to date.
Okay. I think we're going to have to prepare for something like that. You know, you're right. We've never seen this, but it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And, you know, I would hope the legislature would address it, but I just, you know, want to do what we can for our community. And if there's, you know, ways in which we can help and be creative, I hope we can do that. So.
Right. I'm hearing the same thing, Madam Chair. And here, from what I understand is the government, the federal government as well, is much aware of the issues related to people's businesses and others' ability to pay for things. And I think that's a lot of the reasons why a lot of these acts are being implemented, the CARES Acts and others, to offset some of the downfall for lack of ability to keep the engine running. So Jim Talon has a hand up, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Talon.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to speak in support of your suggestion. And I was going to say some of the things that others have said about how well our treasurer has worked with folks who are experiencing financial hardship. I do think that it would be prudent for us to have some conversation with the treasurer about how we might be supportive of his efforts, because I can see him getting overwhelmed and perhaps working together on some sort of standards or guidelines or expectations for where we might accept some additional grace period or something like that. So I certainly think some conversations that include the experience of the treasurer to see how we might be supportive of that would make sense.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Just to respond to that a little bit, you know, that would obviously impact all the locals as well, because of course, property taxes are a lot of government's primary revenue source. So, and a lot of them may not have the cash flow that the county does. So, you know, that may become a bigger issue. I'm not saying it can't be done, but we just have to look at the full scope of that if that's going to be the path forward. So.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure it's on our radar. I'm not suggesting we do anything specific. I know this is going to potentially be an issue, and I just want to make sure that we're planning for any and all contingencies.
Possibilities.
So,
Agreed.
yep. Any other hands up on this?
Chair Bolter?
Yeah.
Just a quick question, if we could hit revenue sharing for a few minutes?
Yeah. What's your question on it?
Way up at the top.
It's not only us, it's of course our other local entities that'll be struggling for this. And it's a pretty big impact. Is that something that you think the CARES Act will be filling in that hole?
So the quick guidance I saw this morning is the CARES Act cannot be used to replace lost revenues. That's unfortunate. And I was on a webinar earlier this week, and they were hoping to push for that amendment to it. But from what the guidance I quickly read this morning, it's not eligible. So I don't think so. And again, that's going to be a huge issue for many communities. For counties, it's interesting. We get mostly statutory revenue sharing, or all statutory revenue sharing, which is part of the budget process, not relying on collections. So I think to make a change to counties revenue sharing, it would take a vote of the legislature. Not to say that they won't do that, but I believe it will continue to come from counties per the budget unless a change is made directly. So.
Madam Chair, I don't know if you and I were talking about this earlier in the week or not, but I understand that the governor's office is not intending on doing anything with revenue sharing, either for counties or either local cities or townships. And with the fact that the governor's, the state of Michigan is going to receive $3.5 billion in CARES Act funding, other funding that they're working through. My take on it is that revenue sharing, they know how important that is, especially for local governments that are smaller than us. They're not intending on touching that at this point because they know, I believe, how detrimental that would be for local communities, especially at this time. That's my take on it. I don't believe that there's going to be a rate on the revenue sharing at this point based on the fact that the federal government is providing additional resources to locals as well as the state.
Well, right now, I mean, for Jeff's 20 estimate, which would go, I mean, their cycle would go through September 30th of the current year for the current 20. So we would probably get what we were appropriated for 20, and I have heard there might be some negative supplementals coming, which would be the first time that most of these folks have ever done that.
Right.
But, you know, I guess, Jeff, they have cut our revenue sharing before, and
Yes, they have.
I don't view it as, you know, overly stable, and I'm not 100% confident they're not going to do it. And
Well,
I
some of
don't know
them-
what the guidance is on the $3 billion that they're getting. I mean, they're going to have to plug multiple holes. School aid fund alone is going to be devastated. So, you know, I think we should plan on potentially taking a hit there. Maybe not all of it, but a hit.
I agree with you. They've hit revenue sharing before. It's one of their first items they typically will take a chunk out of. And I saw some of their projections at the state level, and it's, you know, billions of dollars, not millions of dollars that they expect in lost revenue. So I don't think there's any other way for them to balance a budget without hitting revenue sharing.
Yep. Okay, let's try to move forward. If there's any way we can have a hard stop at like 8:20-ish, I would like to try to do that just to allow staff to set up for our board meeting. So moving forward, we talked about bond rating, we talked about financial projections. Do you want to discuss 3C?
Sure. Ada Chelonia, Al Jano's here in the room as well. Matthew Van Zetten, I don't know if you all know, but he's on medical leave. He had a serious infection, not related to COVID, of course, and the other illness that he has, the other life illness that he has. And so he's not here, but Al is here. Steve Duarte and Jeff are both aware of where we are. Madam Chair, we talked about this during the bond rating meetings as well, where we are in terms of how we see the 82 Onion 320 Ottawa projects. And right now, based on everything that we understand, those projects are on hold. It doesn't mean that we're not planning in anticipating that when we get through COVID, that those projects could turn back on. So there is still some preliminary planning work that's happening. Al Jano's here. Jeff, Steve, you're on the phone. So if there's any additional information, I'll turn it over to Jeff, Al, and Steve.
Yeah, I think I'll start. We relayed to the rating agencies last week that, yeah, given the circumstances, the board would be very, very hesitant to proceed with any additional bond projects until, you know, the full extent of COVID is you know, known, which we probably won't know for a while, is my thinking. Additionally, and again, I said this myself, I haven't discussed this with the board or chair or Wayman or anyone, but, you know, this whole event, I think, will make us rethink how we work. You know, this whole remote thing, while it seemed impossible at the beginning, seems to be functioning pretty well. Even meetings like this, I think, go really smoothly. So we may, you know, completely redo our need space and come up with different conclusions going forward. So,
Jeff, that's a good point. I don't want to get ahead of anything.
right.
We want to be very careful and thoughtful about how we manage the space and so forth. We got to work with all of the elected and so forth and make sure we manage it. But that is definitely something that we're figuring out. How do we work remotely? How do we manage ourselves differently? How do we combine research? We've had discussions about different functions, how we could combine different functions as well. So a lot of those discussions are going to be had. But Al, I don't know if you have any additional information on where we are with the planning process. Could you talk about that?
As you shared, much of our strategic planning has been paused over the past 30 or 40 days. Really, the project landscape, to Jeff's point, as in the construction industry, is changing. It's definitely not settled yet. It's very challenging to get any type of accurate cost estimates or timing estimates because of the devastation to so many small businesses that supply the larger businesses. So some of the strategic planning will be a little bit more in depth going forward and changed to Jeff's point. There was when this just started to break in the Kent County area, we were having discussions with City of Grand Rapids, and we talked about potential courtrooms. I did want to share that those initial discussions were extremely favorable in us being able to, I don't know what the right word is, capture, buy, lease one of their courtrooms extremely long term. So that's a relief to us, and like a relief valve to be able to do that. And truth be told, in the near weeks to come, there's probably not a lot of strategic planning that will move forward, simply because of so many unknowns. Some of our partners that in our parking solution for downtown, those folks are quite unavailable and such, been furloughed. So more to come. It will be very interesting where we are at. And yes, this may sound too optimistic, but we should know a lot more, I would imagine, if pace goes, and again, maybe it's my optimism, in the next 60 to 90 days, we'll be able to start making things a little more accurate, because I'm extremely impressed in what I'm hearing from the leaders in West Michigan of the construction industry and the architectural engineering community about how quick they feel they can get their sea legs back under them again.
Yes, I want to kind of talk to executive board members. I mean, what are your thoughts? What are you on this project? And then maybe after that, Al, can you also give us kind of an update on the 3 projects that we pulled the trigger on earlier this year regarding, paying in cash? Any board members have any input on the 82 Ionia project?
Yeah, I raised my hand. Thank you. It just strikes me, and Al mentioned this a little bit here, that is certainly this is an unpredictable and moving target that we're dealing with as to the changes in the construction industry, changes in the economy as a whole, but with a optimistic expectation that we'll be moving in the next 60, 90 days to re-engagement. It may be important for us to be actively reviewing this in that time period. Not just because there's changes that'll be going on in that construction industry, but these kinds of projects may also be very positive statements to the community, to the stability of where we're headed. So I know that we're going to be dealing with COVID for a long time, not just 60 days. It's going to be part of our strategic thinking for a while, but certainly would encourage that we take a hard look at this maybe 60, 90 days out again.
Anyone else?
No one else.
Right. Okay, and then Al, do you want to address the other projects real quick?
Yeah, the 3 projects, of course, the chair is speaking of is our North County property development for a new substation and health department clinic. We're at the point of, we just started getting some survey work done, and surveyors need to be out there. We were cautious to not remember, we're going back a month ago now when we were doing that survey work. We're trying to do that. And the executive orders came in for essential services. We could push perhaps and say, hey, the construction of a sheriff's substation and a new health clinic is essential. The optics of that might be challenged by many. So we put that on pause. The A&E firm, DLZ, that's working with us, totally understands that. I'm hoping that on Friday, when the governor shares some more executive orders, maybe, or adjustments to those, maybe then we can tip that to say, hey, it's quite an essential services, to Commissioner Steck's point about, hey, there is life still going on, and we're trying to move on to the stage of recovery. Parks, we're in consultation with an A&E firm to bring them on board very soon. And to all of your points and how these meetings work, some of that can be done in the very near future. In the weeks to come, we'll commence on that for with this type of meeting, and still maintaining distancing. Fleet, we weren't projected to do anything with that until I think it was end of August at the earliest anyway, according to our initial schedule that I've shared all along. So, Chair, that's where we're at.
Any comments or questions regarding those 3 projects?
So, Madam Chair, just a comment about these projects. The caution, we are very cautious about getting out ahead and minimizing any expenses related to these projects. So Al, he talks about, some of the architectural engineering firms, surveyors, and so forth. We're very cautious about extending any additional time so that we don't end up having to look down the road. We put 19 million or so on the table for these capital projects. We want to keep that 19 million in tow, like we talked about during the call. So just be aware that we are very careful not to expend any dollars related to those projects, related to any prep work. But we do want to make sure that we take advantage of the offers that some of the firms, in fact, have come back and said, can we just do it? And I guess at some point we'll share more about that. But some firms are really motivated to just do things because they feel so good about the county and being a partner with the county. They almost want to do these things kind of as a favor, as opposed to even being paid. So we're talking through some of that.
And that's related to the architectural and engineering work. To Wayman's point, we wouldn't. We're not moving forward with construction work, but simply the architectural and engineering work, which is valuable to us, whether these projects move forward as initially planned and scheduled, or they are paused for a period of months or whatever. Thank you.
Any other commissioner comments on this issue? Anyone's hand up?
No hands up.
I guess
No
my
one's got
concern,
a-
I'm sorry.
No one is got a hand up.
My concern is that I think we need to hit the pause button a little bit here and see where we're at.
Yes.
That cash flow may be needed. And so
Yes.
I guess I would be concerned about us moving quickly forward in 60 days and not really fully understanding the impact until a year from now. So
Yes.
that's kind of my thoughts, but
Yes.
okay, if there are no other comments on this, let's move on to old business. Any old business today? Any hands up?
No hands up.
We're a sleepy bunch today. All right, we'll move on to miscellaneous. Any miscellaneous for executive committee?
Commissioner Steck. Commissioner
Steck?
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick report, because we've talked an awful lot about some of the ongoing financial challenges in the community mental health world. It's been our experience since the challenges with COVID-19 that actual expenditures tend to have declined over the course of the last couple of months, and number of enrollees is trending up. Now, if you've watched this carefully, you know what that means. That means there's additional cash in the system, which is positive for stability given the long-term funding challenges that we've had there. But one of the other challenges is we continue to have difficulty with direct care providers. These are very challenging circumstances to be a direct care provider. So one of the things that we've done is we pushed some extra cash into providing some compensation, some, I don't know, Commissioner Talon, what do we call it? Hero pay? I've kind of forgotten. But in order to continue to assist in making sure that we have those providers there, ready, and continue to provide services. So a glimmer of a little positive in a environment that has been perpetually difficult.
All right, any other miscellaneous today for executive committee? Commissioner Jones, Commissioner Breivy, Commissioner Talon? No?
No hands up.
All right, we will adjourn the executive committee. Anyone who has questions, obviously send them to Wayman, send them to Jeff. I fully anticipate that we will have multiple financial projections moving forward. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
30.